Part 2. Welcome back. So, in the last video we talked about how the MCU got where it was, the top of the dang world. But as I said at the end of that video, there was a time when it looked like westerns would go on forever, and, well, they didn't. Past success doesn't guarantee future success, especially in the nerd realm. Sorry nerds, but y'all are fickle. 2 controversial Star Wars films was all it took to burn away 2 entire generations of goodwill. And every franchise is one big band dance scene, a nuked fridge, or a pair of bat nipples away from fan revolt. Other than Marvel, superhero IPs are really uneven. DC, X-Men, Spider-Man, and Fantastic Four have as many misses as hits. In 3 solo films, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, which looked like it should have been a sure thing, only stuck the landing once. The MCU makes it look easy, but it's not. Are you nervous yet? Well, also, the end of the Infinity Saga, plus a shift to Disney Plus TV content, is a good spot for casual fans to get off the train. After all, Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans did. The pandemic means that train has been at the station longer than expected. The most exciting franchise in the next phase lost its star. Rest in power, Chadwick Boseman. The second most exciting next phase franchise has been cancelled by both the left, Chris Pratt, and the right, James Gunn. So how does the MCU stay on top? They've got their work cut out for them. Here's what I think the MCU has to do to stay number 1. Challenge number 1. Don't get too cosmic or too comic book goofy. Sometimes in Hollywood, people learn the wrong lesson from success. Look at the Nolan Batman films. They were gritty and dark, and they made tons of money. So, they made a gritty and dark Superman film. But that isn't who Superman is. Instead of learning that a movie's mood and style have to fit its protagonist, they thought being dark and gritty was the secret sauce. We know how that turned out. What wrong lesson might Marvel learn? Well, Marvel made a ton of money with 2 movies about a purple giant from space with a glove of magic stones. The heroes beat him with time travel. Alrighty then. Those films succeeded despite the magic, powerful artifacts, the space stuff, and multiverse skipping, because all that comic book stuff was happening to characters we cared about. But I'm afraid Marvel's got it backwards. If they're looking at the Infinity Saga's box office returns and thinking Hollywood audiences clearly crave alternate universe doppelganger subplots and ever more powerful MacGuffins, things are going south. We cared about the snap because it was about the characters. It happened to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, the hero we wanted to hug, and not the other way around. I said one of the reasons the MCU's been successful so far is because they introduced the weird because comic books stuff really gradually, which is good because you need to bring film audiences along before they're ready for the full comic booky goofy stuff. MCU needs to continue introducing the really weird stuff gradually over a number of films so that the focus stays on the characters in each film. We first saw, then learned the properties of things like the Time Stone, the Power Stone, Thor's Hammer, and the Quantum Realm. And then we saw them used to save the day. This is Sanderson's Law of Magic, but it works for comic book Infinity Gauntlets and Eternal Diadems and Amulets of Wazuzu as well. You can only solve problems with magic, or Infinity Gems, to the extent that the audience understands how the magic works. And it takes time to explain that stuff. The weirder, the longer. If you rush the introductions of characters or comic book powerful artifacts, you get Justice League. Justice League tried to introduce, explain, and deploy the mother boxes all in a single film, while also introducing and resolving conflicts for a bunch of characters we'd never met and didn't care about yet. Even the 4-hour Snyder Cut couldn't fit that all in. So, When I see the Eternals poster with superheroes lined up like a Da Vinci painting, I get nervous. Wow, that's a lot of characters. Now, if anyone can make me care for a dozen new demigods we haven't met before, it might be Chloe Zhao. But I don't know if anyone can. Upcoming MCU films make me nervous in this regard. Titles like The Multiverse of Madness and Quantum Mania, the meddling with reality theme in the Spider-Man trailer, Loki, WandaVision, and What If just devoted 3 whole seasons of television to muddying up the idea of a coherent linear reality, and I'm not sure if fans will be there for it in the numbers Disney expects. There's a limit to how much nerd talk most people will tolerate. If I say something like, "Whoa, grandfather paradox, those Noldor better get their Patronus out of the Phantom Zone before their midichlorian count causes another decimation," well, a small number of movie fans will start to hate me for mixing lores. A much bigger number of movie fans' eyes glaze over. Now, the MCU can go ahead and target that niche nerd audience, but not if they want Black Panther or Infinity War box office numbers. For those kinds of returns, they can't only appeal to people who already know what the secret wars are. They also have to appeal to people who call Thor the one who lost his hammer. Fans who just want to see pretty people punching things will tune out if a third of every future MCU movie is explaining the new tiara of destiny, how multiverse doppelgangers work, and what the new galactic supervillain wants. And if you asked me to pick the most likely stumbling block for the next phase of the MCU, I'd put my money on this one. Challenge 2. Make sure we're invested in the characters. Marvel has a lot of characters to juggle now, and we're used to the MCU too, so I suppose it makes sense that not many characters get their entire own origin film anymore. I'm not wild about origin films anyway because there have been so many, but somewhere in Phase 2, instead of getting 3 whole films to get used to and find reasons to root for characters, like we had with Captain America and Iron Man, we had Spider-Man and Black Panther introduced in the middle of someone else's film. We rarely saw inside the heads of guys like Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes or Scarlet Witch until this TV series. But trying to get us invested in them only after Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. already left the franchise sort of feels like doing your homework 5 minutes before class to me. So, which Phase 2 and Phase 3 characters do I enjoy hanging out with as much as Captain America and Iron Man? Well, for me, Shuri, Spider-Man, the Thor we saw in Ragnarok, Guardians of the Galaxy as a unit, and Loki. Maybe Ant-Man and Valkyrie, but the others haven't grown on me yet. Now, is that enough to hold together a new Avengers lineup? I don't know. Marvel has a lot of plates spinning at the same time, and spaceships and Skrull imposters and tiaras of destiny are shiny, but characters we like and care about are the poles holding up those spinning plates. Avengers 2012 had 6 heroes. A small enough number we could care about each one. How many heroes are there now? If Marvel gets away from introducing, establishing, and making sure we care about each of those characters, well, it all crashes down. Challenge 3. Make sure the movies stand alone. This is something I've believed for a while, starting way back with Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and then Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter. And we've come up against this a lot with comic book movies that draw from storylines that are well known by comic fans. Plain and simple, a movie should stand on its own. Every movie might be the first MCU thing a person will see, and should work as such. Put another way, ask me to watch 3 seasons of TV, or play through a video game, or read a year's worth of comic issues in order to understand what's going on in the new Doctor Strange movie, and I'm out. It's fine that Disney really wants Disney Plus to make it. I also get that movie theaters are due for a big post-COVID rethink, but not everybody has the free time to keep up if Disney unrolls 4 seasons of required viewing television along with its cinema content every year. If I can't understand a movie without first seeing Falcon and Winter Soldier Season 3 or Gamora and Nebula Season 2, I'm done. I have a job and a kid. Plus, there's now a whole decade of films to catch up on. And a decade of X-Men is 4 films, but a decade of MCU is flippin' 19. Somebody's kid just got old enough to enjoy superhero films, but how many films do you have to watch to know who everybody is and what's happening in Endgame? I reckon about 7, bare minimum. That's a lot to ask before heading to the theater. Too many Easter eggs and winks to the fans, and the MCU will not attract new fans anymore. So I think MCU needs to make sure of 3 things. Each movie needs to stand on its own. There should be numerous, sensible jumping on points for fans who aren't interested in watching all 24 previous films. If TV series add Easter eggs that increase enjoyment of a film, that's fine. But there should never be an MCU film that only makes sense if you've watched the relevant TV content. It's cool that the universe keeps getting bigger, but don't ask fans to have a galaxy mind just to keep track of everything. Okay, Mickey? Challenge 4. Don't be stupid about going bigger. There are 3 areas where this happens: superpower inflation, stealing the win, and diminishing returns in raising the stakes. Let's talk about superpower inflation first. DC and the Justice League have something I call the Superman problem. See, Superman is so much more powerful than the other members of the Justice League that it gets hard to tell a good Justice League story. If the enemy is powerful enough to go toe-to-toe with Superman, they basically render the rest of the team irrelevant. If the enemy's power level is low enough to give the rest of the league a good fight, as soon as Superman shows up, they're done. Justice League storytellers have had to constantly contrive ways to either nerf Superman, reducing his powers, or remove him from the scene just to put the outcome in a little doubt. In plain words, that team is out of balance. A team with balanced powers gives everybody a chance to shine. Think about X-Men, Guardians of the Galaxy, or the Fantastic Four. That's way more interesting than waiting for Superman or Captain Marvel to show up and turn the tide. The MCU is starting to have the Superman problem now. Captain Marvel, Scarlet Witch, and Doctor Strange are just an order of magnitude more powerful than the other heroes on the team. Thanos tosses around Mjolnir Cap, Iron Man, and Thor, and then Captain Marvel arrives and takes his best shot on the chin and forces him to his knees all by herself. When Captain Marvel can fly through a spaceship and Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch can warp reality, it barely makes sense to keep heroes like Gamora, Falcon, or even Spider-Man around. Constantly scaling up heroes' power levels paints the storytellers into a corner and makes it hard to justify the presence of lower-powered characters. Next thing, stealing the win. Now, Star Wars is a great example of this. In Star Wars A New Hope, they blew up the Death Star. Okay, cool, that was great. In Return of the Jedi, they blew up a new Death Star, which, we're told, was bigger than the old Death Star. It kind of robs some of the specialness of A New Hope's climax when you know that there'll be another Death Star soon enough. But at least the Nazi stand-in empire was defeated and Palpatine was destroyed, right? Well, guess what? Rolling out an even bigger Death Star and the ridiculous somehow Palpatine returned is what one article, that I can't find back, sorry, described as stealing the win. The very existence of the First Order in The Force Awakens steals the win of Return of the Jedi. What do you mean Nazi stand-in evil empires are back? We just defeated them. Return of the Jedi was so satisfying because they'd done it. What do you mean within a generation another fascist evil empire is taking the spot? And Palpatine is back? Does Return of the Jedi even matter anymore? How dare they take that away from us? When Thanos shows up in Infinity War with the Power Stone, you know that off-screen he's conquered and decimated Xandar, the planet the Guardians of the Galaxy saved with that inspired dance-off scene. It takes the wind out of the sails of one of the MCU's most unexpected showdowns, in one of their best movies, knowing half the witnesses of that dance-off are doomed. Now maybe, in the very specific case of the Power Stone and Infinity War, it works because it was part of the plan leading up to Infinity War. But then, after using all of Infinity War to collect the Infinity Stones once, and half of Endgame to collect them again, in Loki they just toss the Tesseract in a drawer with about 2 more gauntlets worth of gems, and a clerk says, "Yeah, we sometimes use them as paperweights." Does stealing the win from Avengers Endgame impress us and make us care more about Loki? That's debatable. Ultron gathers the Infinity Stones in What If, and zombie Thanos probably does too. Is gauntlet inflation a thing? I feel like it's a thing now. Stealing the win from Endgame after we cheered so hard kind of feels like they're crapping on my enthusiasm. Kinda. Does a pattern of the MCU people treating the things I cared about before as if they're irrelevant now leave me more or less willing to get invested in the next thing? You've got to let those moments stand tall in our memories. If 10 more people picked up Thor's hammer in Phase 4, that Captain Hammer moment in Endgame doesn't stand out as much. Next. Bigger stopped being better in 2013. All the big-time franchises are running into the same problem right now. They keep trying to make the next climax bigger than the last climax, as if people only care about shiny things and explosions. Now, if that were true, Michael Bay would have a shelf of Oscars, not a shelf of golden raspberries. But you just can't keep escalating the stakes by increasing the scale of the threat forever. After you blow up the universe, what comes next? 2 universes? Kang the Conqueror has entered the chat. They saved a whole planet in Age of Ultron, in Guardians 1, in Doctor Strange, and in Spider-Man Far From Home. They saved multiple planets in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. They saved half the population of the entire universe in Avengers Endgame. How do you go bigger than that? You can't. And here's why. Once your threat or disaster is too big to fit on a movie screen, they all look the same. Think about the 2 Death Stars and Starkiller Base. You can tell us they're bigger with exposition, but they look the same blowing up because you have to move the camera farther back just to show it. You could give us a montage of the breadth of a disaster, but we've seen the Eiffel Tower and the White House blow up dozens of times now. Evil beams to the sky? Portals to foul dimensions? Yawn. I think the attack on Manhattan in the first Avengers movie is about as big as a superhero battle can be. For a space battle, it's the first Death Star in Star Wars A New Hope. Once your battle gets bigger than that, you have to start scaffolding with boring exposition scenes. We've got to blow out those generators before we can get past the shields. And that prolongs a battle scene. It might give it a sense of scale, but once your disaster is too big to fit on a movie screen, my eyes start to glaze over. The reason we care about the action is always the characters, though, even in the biggest action climaxes ever made.
I am a god, you dull creature, made by
puny god.
Why are you doing this?
We are Groot.
Activate instant kill!
Luke, you switched off your targeting computer. What's wrong?
That still only counts as one!
And the fact is, even with all that, there are still no stakes bigger than the snap. Blowing up the entire universe isn't bigger than the snap, because when exactly half of the universe gets dusted, That means everyone who didn't die is traumatized with life-changing grief. Blowing up the universe is purely abstract, but seeing the pain and loss play out in Iron Man, Black Widow, Thor, and Hawkeye's lives after the snap, sitting in on Captain America's group therapy session, that makes the cost matter. Even with abstraction and hours of exposition scenes, the snap is still the highest stakes you can possibly have in a story, because the scale of death is amplified by the ongoing grief, pain, and suffering we see in characters we care about. This means there's nowhere to go by continually making the stakes bigger. So what do? Make the stakes matter. I said it's the characters we care about. Well, that's where the stakes have to be located too. The snap did this really well because every character had personal loss. Think of a franchise like Indiana Jones. That dude found the Ark of the Covenant in the first movie. You can't go up from there. There's no way to top the Ark of the Covenant. But the Holy Grail was basically a side quest to finally earning his father's approval in the Last Crusade. And that worked because it was something Indiana Jones cared about, something he needed. Logan finally gave bitter old man Wolverine something worth fighting for. The Dark Knight, if you think about it, had very small stakes. He's trying to save Harvey Dent, one guy, and 2 ferry boats at the end. That's it. But the idea that Gotham was worth saving, even possible to save, was Batman's entire reason to be Batman. So we cared more about those 400 people on those 2 ferries than we cared about General Zod's planet engine pancaking a whole city center, or the Decepticons blasting out downtown Chicago in Transformers: Dark of the Moon. I think superhero movie climaxes reached the point of diminishing returns way back in 2013 with Man of Steel. And trying to keep going bigger from there is at best window dressing, and at worst a fool's errand. The size of the explosion and scale of the risk are secondary to the things the heroes care about, because we care about the heroes, always. So, power inflation, stealing the win, and diminishing returns are the 3 areas that I think could blindside the MCU and hobble their, so far, excellent storytelling acumen. We'll see if they navigate these upcoming challenges, and I hope they do, but I also hope somebody in the Brain Trust has their eye on them. Now in the next video, I'm going to talk about 2 big problems the MCU has created for itself that are pressing on the franchise's storytelling right now. Thank you all for watching this video, and be sure to subscribe so you can catch the next one too.